the 1800s, it was normal that a woman with a status of wealth, living in high society, find a good suitor for marriage. For 25-year-old Blanche Monnier, this was no different. In 1876, she thought she had found her perfect person, but who would have known her love life would lead to 25 years of horror. Blanche Monnier's parents were Charles and Louise Monnier. Their family had a spotless reputation and were well respected in the city. Blanche's mother was a socialite who frequented charities, galas, cocktails, and parties. Her father, Charles, was the Dean of Arts at the University of Poiters. Louise Monnier was a pillar of her community and received awards due to her role in society. For all everyone knew, the family had a squeaky clean image, but little did they know, Madame Monnier was harboring a deep, dark secret. Blanche Monnier was considered a young, beautiful French woman who could have had her first pick at the best suitors. However, Blanche decided she wanted to marry a man of lower class. When she told her parents, they were mortified. Not only was the man common with no status, he was a penniless lawyer in debt and was twice her age. Still, Blanche refused to give in and insisted that this was the man that she would be marrying, regardless of what her parents thought. Louise was infuriated. She was not going to let Blanche tarnish the family's good name by marrying a commoner. What was worse to her father Charles was that the man was a Republican who was protesting. This caused issues between the Republicans and the monarchs. The Monnier family were also devoted Catholics, so protests were things frowned upon to their religion. When Blanche refused to call off the wedding, her mother Louise thought of a perfect plan to deter her from marrying the man. She would lock her in her room until she snapped out of it and decided to choose a more reasonable suitor. What started off as a deterrent ended up being captivity for Blanche for many years to come. Blanche was locked in an attic and chained to a bed. By 1876, everyone thought that Blanche had disappeared off the face of the earth. When asked, her mom made excuses, saying things like she moved to Scotland or she went to a boarding school in the UK. Her father was considered a weak man, so he did nothing while his wife held their daughter in captivity. He passed away in 1882, never uttering a word about what had happened to his daughter, taking their family secret to his grave. Blanche's lover passed away in 1885, never knowing or suspecting. Blanche's mental health began to deteriorate. She saw ghosts, had her clothes removed, refused to eat, and was alone for hours on end. She never came out of her room and never even saw sunlight. Even the employees, if they knew the family's secret, never uttered a word. Her brother Marcel, strange himself, knew of the cruel conditions his sister was living in. Still, he turned a blind eye and went on with his life as usual. When Blanche's caretaker, Mary Fazy, passed away in 1896, her health began to increasingly diminish and she was severely neglected. In 1899, Madame Monnier began to hire 2 new family employees. This would be the end of the family's deep, dark secret. With Madame Monnier's health declining, she was unable to tell others of how to take care of Blanche. The new employees were inexperienced and didn't know how to care for her. It was believed to be for that reason an anonymous letter was sent to the Attorney General, Monsieur Morlet. The letter stated, "I am referring to an old maid who was locked up in Madame Monnier's house, half-starved, and has lived in a rotten bed for the past 25 years, in a word, in her own filth." That same day, the Attorney General sent 3 of his agents to visit the home to investigate the accusation. They demanded that Louise and Marcel show them the house. Though reluctant, they led them to the room where Blanche was. To their horror, they opened the door and was hit with a strong stench. It was so bad that the agents had to stop the investigation. Lying in the bed was a woman with nails and toenails curled, hair touching her ankles, skeletal and malnourished. She was completely naked and her mattress was rotten. There were bed bugs in her bed and the air was unbreathable. There was rotten food in her bed as well. Louise confessed and told the officers she was worried that her daughter would associate the family with a failed man and dirty the family's honor. Her plan was to lock her up until she was sure that she would never marry him. The press released an article immediately, blasting the family for what they had done to Blanche. Her neighbors, the ones she tried so hard to impress, sat outside her jail cell and blasted her for what she had done, and she was ridiculed in the streets. Louise could not take the shame and ended up dying 2 weeks after her imprisonment from a heart attack, June 8th, 1901. Her brother Marcel was also charged as an accomplice, though he tried to blame the captivity on his mother. He claimed he wanted to put Blanche in a mental institution, but his mother refused. On October 11th, 1901, Marcel Monnier was sentenced to 15 months in prison. It is important to note that during that time, there was no official law that states you had to help a person at risk. Because of this, Marcel appealed his sentence, and the courts eventually dropped all charges. In their eyes, he tried to help his sister, but was too afraid of his mother to do so. During the trial, it became to be known that the employees did in fact know about Blanche's condition, but told different stories. They claimed her mental health declined after having a severe fever at the age of 23. They also claimed she was indeed allowed to come out of her bedroom and she played piano from time to time. They tried to give her clothes, but due to her being mentally ill, she ripped them off and refused to eat. They also claimed that Blanche was given clean sheets, but refused to go to the restroom and soiled herself in bed. She would just stand in the window and wanted to be alone constantly. This was hard to believe, being that when she was rescued, she had to be cut out of chains to be freed. As for Blanche Monnier, she was only 25 kilograms when she was found, and now 54 years old. She was so weak when found, she could not even stand on her own. Although rescued, it was far from a happy ending. Blanche suffered from a string of mental illnesses, including schizophrenia, coprophilia, and anorexia. She was considered mad and was sent to a mental institution in Paris. She was clean-shaven, well-fed and dressed, but she never returned back to normal. Her health declined immensely, and she eventually passed away on October 13, 1913, at the age of 64. Her brother Marcel also passed away the same year in his mansion while his sister wasted away. The sad truth is, many people failed Blanche, including the doctors and employees that turned a blind eye to her treatment. The question is, if it were true what they said about Blanche's mental illness, why keep her locked up? Was it true that she stayed inside due to her mental illness? It was rumored that the person who wrote the letter was one of the employee's boyfriend. The employee was Juliette Dupuy, and she showed her French lieutenant boyfriend Blanche living quarters. This was forbidden by Louise. The lieutenant had the decency to report Blanche's living conditions to the Attorney General. Had he not, who knows how long Blanche would have suffered at the hands of her mother.